Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carpet City Cinema, a Gila Films podcast. I'm David Weaver, and this is going to be, like a couple weeks ago, another legacy episode, one of the handful of original episodes I recorded way back when I was kind of testing out the idea of doing a podcast. This particular episode was recorded January 31st, 2022, so not exactly timely, but hey, why let it go to waste? A couple editorial notes as you go into this episode. I was less concerned about spoilers, revealing spoilers in my reviews of films when I did those initial handful of episodes. So the film in question that's reviewed in this episode, I give a warning in the original recording as well, but there are some spoilers revealed, something I don't really do anymore. When I did it originally, I was more of the opinion that if people listen to this, they're probably going to have actually seen the movies already, but now I'm kind of changed positions on that, and just want to kind of respect keeping the film's secrets to itself, and trusting that there will be some people who listen to this podcast who haven't watched these movies yet. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was that this episode discusses how Paramount, at the time it was recorded, seemed to be less willing to license titles out. It seemed like they were taking a break from licensing titles out to boutique labels to release on Blu-ray. And it was at this time that Imprint Films was really hitting the ground running out of Australia and able to, perhaps because of different territorial issues, was able to put out some Paramount titles at that time. And in the episode, I talk about how, oh man, I don't know when or if Paramount's going to let labels like Kino Lorber touch Paramount stuff again. And could these be the only releases on Blu-ray that some of these more obscure titles get that Imprint's putting out? Well, good news is that in that following year, since I recorded this year and a half, Paramount has seemed to kind of go back to licensing titles out. In fact, one of the titles I mentioned in the episode, Outrage, the Ed Lapina movie, which Imprint was putting out at the time, has since been announced for release by Kino Lorber. And Paramount is still continuing forward with its own kind of curated line of titles that it's self-releasing, which is something they had started back then. But they do seem to be back more in the mindset of also handing some titles over to some other companies. So just wanted to give those couple disclaimers, Surgeon General warnings. Hope you enjoy this episode. And thanks for listening. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Carpet City Cinema, a Gila Films podcast. I'm David Weaver. And now that we've got the introductions out of the way, we'll just kind of get into the regular format for the show. Start off by talking about what's going on with Gila Films, move into the news, anything going on in the film industry or physical media, and wrap up with any thoughts I have on some films I've seen recently. So starting off, Gila Films, what's going on now? Last Frankenstein, working on the subtitles for that, a necessary step before we get it off to streaming and physical media. What that process entails is I had a copy of the movie sent out to a subtitle company. They send back the subtitle track, and then I've got to go through it and proofread, make any corrections. So that shouldn't take too much longer. Although I don't really foresee us putting it out for streaming or physical media probably before April. There's a film festival we submitted to that, without saying it, they pretty much want to be able to screen films that aren't widely available. And it's a pretty well-known film festival. So I want to give us the best chance to get into that. And that festival will not notify us one way or the other till I think it's April 1st. So subtitles, and also we have coming up on February 26th. I don't know if I've uploaded these episodes by then, but February 26th, we are bringing back the movie to the big screen locally. We're going to screen it at the Madison Theater in Albany, New York. And we chose that because when we screened the film initially, we had our premiere at Proctor's Theater in Schenectady, which is a historical theater, very well known in the area. And because Amsterdam, where I live and where we shot most of the film, doesn't have its own theater anymore, we screened it for the local community, people who couldn't get to Schenectady, at a theater in Johnstown, New York, which is like 25, 30 minutes away. The Johnstown Movieplex. And the owner of that theater, Bruce Wendell, huge supporter of our film and of local filmmakers in general. And if you've ever seen the documentary Addicted to Fame, which is about Anna Nicole Smith and her last movie, it was directed by David Giancola, who directed Time Chasers. The Johnstown Movieplex is actually mentioned in that movie. It's where they had the premiere of Anna Nicole's last film, Illegal Aliens, except I didn't recognize it at first as the theater because they pronounced it Jonestown. But we screened it there, planned it for only 1 week. And then Bruce, he's like, well, why don't we try for 2 weeks? And it ended up lasting there for 4 weeks, which was awesome, to have like a no budget local film with, a regional cast, and for it to hold over for 4 weeks. In our initial weekend, we actually beat out Dune, which was the just opening that weekend as well. Although both of us fell short of the held over Halloween Kills. But hey, I'll take beating out a multi-million dollar science fiction franchise. And even if that means I can't beat out Michael Myers. So when we did our advertising on Facebook for the Johnstown screening, we saw that after Amsterdam, the most response we had by location to our ads was actually from Albany. And I guess that kind of makes sense. It's more populated. It's got a more vibrant art community than some of the other closer cities. So we thought we'd reach out to the Madison and Albany and see what we could work out there. And they've been on board with us showing it there. It's just going to be one night, but hoping that we have a good turnout. And we're running some ads now. So I think that's kind of pretty much that, and just doing this podcast and continuing to work on the script for the sequel to The Last Frankenstein, which is going to be titled Beyond the Last Frankenstein, in case you're wondering. Those are kind of the main things going on right now with us. And also, I think it's about time I upgrade my computer. Wasn't sure if I'd even be recording this podcast today. Had some computer issues that I thought might be of a critical, fatal nature, but was able to rectify those. Although I do believe that this is a message from up above that it is time to take the old tax return and buy Gila Films a new computer. So what's going on news-wise? Nothing. Unfortunately, there's some people who've passed, but aside from that, I didn't. Nothing too crazy going on in the film industry right now. But definitely want to take note of some people we've unfortunately lost since we recorded the last episode. Some of these I'll just kind of, take a briefer look at. Dick Halligan, age 78, who was a member of the band Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Played a bunch of instruments for them: trombone, keyboards, flute. It was with them for their first 4 albums, but also got involved in scoring movies and starting out with the Barbra Streisand film The Owl and the Pussycat. And then he went on to do the Burt Lancaster war movie Go Tell the Spartans. He did a couple Chuck Norris movies, The Octagon and A Force of One. And then after scoring Abel Ferrara's Fear City, he left that part of the business behind. But yeah, he was 78. Morgan Stevens, who was mostly a television actor, he passed away age 70. Probably best remembered for being on Fame, the TV series Fame. He had a recurring role in there and also even wrote an episode. Fans of the Waltons, which is how I, best know him for, because when I grew up, my parents would watch reruns of the Waltons on the Family Channel, but he played Aaron Walton's husband, Paul. Only in one episode. He was actually in 2 episodes of the show. The first episode, he was playing a different character. Then he played Paul Northridge in one episode, who marries Aaron, the middle daughter, and then he went on to appear in some of the initial TV movies in that role too. And actually had kind of a tragic thing happen to him in the late 80s. He was arrested on a charge of DUI, put in jail, and while he was in jail, suffered a really bad assault. And apparently, from what my understanding from the LAPD, he had a broken nose, a fractured cheek, dislocated jaw, nerve damage. He didn't. If you look at his filmography, he went a couple years without doing anything after that few years. And the charge was actually dropped against him, the DUI charge. He was cleared by a blood alcohol test, and he actually had a lawsuit against the LAPD that he had to they settled. He did eventually return to acting, though. He had a recurring role on Melrose Place, did some other stuff too. Didn't really do too much though in the way of feature films. He was in a post-apocalyptic, one of those post-nuclear uh, films called Survival Zone, and he was in a low-budget frontier movie called Upriver, but really didn't do too much in the way of feature work. But he was 70; he passed away. Peter Robbins, age 65, whose big claim to fame was the original voice of Charlie Brown in about roughly half a dozen of the TV specials. Most notably, of course, the two classics: "It's the Great Pumpkin," Charlie Brown, "A Charlie Brown Christmas," and also in the first feature film, A Boy Named Charlie Brown. He also had a recurring role on the late '60s Blondie TV series, and sadly took his own life, age 65. He had a lifetime struggle with mental health and addiction issues, but yeah, definitely will always kind of have that place in TV and film history for being the person who embodied and kind of created the iconic representation of that character. Echika Churo, age 92, French actress, who did have a role in the prominent film I Vinti by Michelangelo Antonioni, and also appeared in a couple of William Wellman's later films over here, Lafayette Escadrille and Darby's Rangers, both of which were war films. Also had recognition in the public eye because she dated for a while Hassan II, who went on to become the ruler of Morocco. Howard Hesseman passed away, age 81. Of course, Johnny Fever on WKRP in Cincinnati, a role that gained him 2 Emmy nominations. And later on, he starred on Head of the Class, instantly recognizable actor who I love him he had for a while, a very brief time, a recurring role on the Bob Newhart Show as one of Bob's patients. He's also starred on the show Head of the Class. And when they did the new WKRP in Cincinnati, he came back and appeared in some episodes of that. A lot of really big films he was in over the years. He was, when he first started out, one of his earlier roles was in Billy Jack. He was in Shampoo, About Schmidt. This is Spinal Tap. I think the first movie I ever saw him in was Flight of the Navigator. Being a kid in the 80s, I saw him in that. But, just obviously a really great career. He passed away age 81. And then last is Donald May, age 92, who, like Morgan Stevens, was primarily a TV actor. He appeared for about 10-year run on the soap The Edge of the Night. He starred on the TV show The Roaring Twenties, which ran up against The Untouchables, kind of covers some of that same territory back in the 60s. And he was on the 50s TV show West Point, where he played a cadet who basically hosted that anthology show, which featured dramatizations of stories that happened at the military academy. And he also had some feature work too, appeared in a couple of Disney movies, Tiger Walks and Follow Me Boys, and later on was in Robert Altman's Ocean Stigs. But yeah, age 92. So also now let's move on to physical media. What's been happening there? The big news for me is exciting to see that Imprint Films, which is an Australian label, which works with several of the studios, but kind of one of the most exciting things is that they have dealings with Paramount, which has allowed them to put out on Blu-ray titles which haven't been released in the States so far, some of which haven't even had DVD releases out here. So Paramount used to be kind of more open to licensing titles out to some of these boutique labels. Kino Lorber, Olive Films both had a lot of Paramount titles released. In the UK, you have Eureka tackle them. Of course, Criterion gets access to everything. But they've kind of switched gears and kind of focused on self-distributing their titles and releasing their own line of stuff. And that's kind of caused them to basically close off access to a lot of these labels. Scream Factory is still been able to put out some stuff from them. And I'm sure Criterion, they tend to have special privileges. But there's a lot of stuff that it's if it's going to come, it's probably going to have to come from Paramount themselves, which is fine because they've been putting out their own Blu-rays. They've started this whole line called Paramount Presents, and lots of great stuff they've been tackling. Everything from the silent movie classic The Sheik to box office 80s hits like Flashdance. They did The Greatest Show on Earth, The Court Jester. But some of these titles that Imprint is releasing down on Australia are ones that I don't know that we're going to see them here anytime soon because they're not big enough. Well, I'd be concerned that they wouldn't be big enough titles for Paramount to bother releasing on their own, but because they're not licensing stuff out to as many people, are we going to see them up here at all? So, like for example, they put out down in Australia, Imprint put out "I Married a Monster from Outer Space" on Blu-ray. Now I could see Scream Factory putting that out here, but I don't really see Paramount doing that themselves. And right now, that's the only way to get that on Blu-ray. One I just picked up is The Possession of Joel Delaney, which is a 70s horror film with Shirley MacLaine and Perry King, and I'm a huge Perry King fan. And again, that got a DVD release here years ago, but, I guess, again, it's a horror movie, so I guess Scream Factory could tackle it, but, you don't know that that's really going to see much of a release here. Ida Lupino's Outrage just came out from Imprint Films. And, again, even though Ida Lupino is a highly regarded filmmaker, she was, one of the possibly the first major, arguably the first major female filmmaker post World War II, and of course also a really well-known actress. I don't know that it's going to come out up here. So they just announced their April releases, and included among them are The Counterfeit Traitor with William Holden, which is a World War II espionage film that I've wanted to see for some time. I have not had a chance to see it. Paramount, again, put out on DVD a while back here, but William Holden, it reteams him with director George Seaton, and they had worked on a couple films prior to this, Apartment for Peggy and The Country Girl, which is, the Academy Award-winning film with Grace Kelly. So definitely looking to check that out. And then The Brotherhood, which was the mafia film with Kirk Douglas, which, if memory serves me right, it was kind of the failure of that film to really strike a chord with the public that really kind of made the idea of doing a mafia film, a big mafia adaptation, seem a little risky until, of course, The Godfather came along, which was also a Paramount title a few years later. But I saw The Brotherhood a long time ago. My grandpa used to have it on VHS. I remember thinking it was a solid enough movie, but we're talking literally, I don't know, 30 years ago it's been now since I saw it. So definitely looking forward to picking that up at some time. And again, these could come out here from Paramount, but they definitely don't strike me as titles that they're really going to be after. They'll be high up on their docket to self-release. Kino Lorber just announced that they're going to be putting out on Blu-ray Son of Samson, which is one of the peplum films, the peplum genre, also kind of known as the sword and sandal genre, which was what came about after the success of the 1959 film Hercules, starring Steve Reeves, and that was a big hit. And so before you knew it, you've got all these Hercules movies, Samson movies, Goliath movies. It was a genre it was incredibly popular for almost a decade. And that golden era has pretty much been ignored in the high definition world of physical media. I mean, they've gotten lots of budget labeled DVDs and VHS releases, but it's not till you get to like the Lou Ferrigno movies in the 80s, which really aren't part of that classic golden era, that you start seeing those movies getting home media releases. And I think the first one that really, again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the first one of the kind of that golden era that got a Blu-ray release in the States here was Hercules in the Haunted World. And that only happened like a couple of years ago. And that was directed by Mario Bava, the famous Italian horror filmmaker. So I think that kind of gave it an edge. But then Kino Lorber, this is the second one they've announced relatively recently that they're going to do. So it's cool to see them start to tackle this genre. This one stars Mark Forrest, who was in a number of these films and who just actually recently passed away this year, actually, within 2022. Still hoping that we'll get Steve Reeves' original movie out on Blu-ray and the sequel Hercules Unchained. But we'll see. Maybe that'll be in the works, because that's the one that really kind of kicked off everything. Now, I'm personally excited because I just got an order from Diabolic DVD, which I think I may have mentioned them in another episode. Diabolic DVD is an online retailer that sells a lot of product. I guess you could say, I hate to say it just specializes in cult films. That's a huge part of its inventory, but also other kind of genre films, niche films. They got some mainstream stuff too, but they're a great online retailer. Definitely recommend them. www.diabolicdvd.com. I just showed my age by saying the www, but They are also really a great resource for imported titles that might prove a little trickier or more expensive to get from their actual uh, distributors. I mean, from their actual labels to put them out. So I just got in a shipment from them 4 movies, all imports. 3 of them were imprint titles, the label I was just talking about earlier, which you can order direct from their site, but it seems a little bit more easier to deal with just going through Diabolic DVD. But I got Tamlin, which I'm just trying to think of myself. Yeah, all 3 of the 4 titles I bought, 3 of them I've never seen before. One of those is Tamlin, which was a 1968 film, the only movie directed by Roddy McDowell. It stars Ava Gardner, Ian McShane. Now, this one of the 4 titles I bought, this one does have a USA Blu-ray release by Olive Films, but I was really interested in the history of this movie, and the imprint release includes an audio commentary. The American release was just bare bones, so pick that up. I got the Possession of Joel Delaney, which I mentioned earlier, was one the imprint just put out. And again, that's definitely an interesting film. It's the only one of these 4 that I've actually seen before. And Shirley MacLaine turned down The Exorcist, the lead role in The Exorcist, which went on to Ellen Burstyn, and did this film instead, which came out shortly before The Exorcist. And it's definitely not as good as The Exorcist, but it's a very worthwhile watch. She and Perry King play siblings, and she becomes to realize that King may be possessed by the spirit of a serial killer, and is murdering women. But like I said, I'm a huge Perry King film, and it's just great casting to see them as siblings in this movie. Another title I picked up was House of Cards with George Papard. Again, haven't seen this one. The interesting thing about this film is it's probably not likely to see a U.S. release of any kind anytime soon. There's some type of clearance issue with it, which has been around for a while. Sometimes these are clearance issues, whether it's getting the rights to a song that might be in the movie or to the intellectual property a movie might be based on. They are kind of specific to certain territories. So this movie did get a Blu-ray in France a little while ago, and now Imprint's put it out. But as of last I heard, it still is not available legally for release in the States. And this film stars George Papard, who I've been watching Banachek lately with a girlfriend, as a boxer. It sounds kind of like a crazy, interesting plot. He's a boxer who ends up tutoring a boy over in Europe, and this leads him to stumble into a plot to overthrow the French government and replace it with a fascist government. Inger Stevens, Orson Welles round out the cast, so definitely looking forward to checking that out. It's one of at least 3 movies that Papard was directed by John Gillerman, and they worked on PJ, which is the late 60s film with Gail Honeycutt, and they also did the Blue Max World War I film. That might be the only ones they worked on. And then lastly of the order I got in is Sodom and Gomorrah, which really want to check that one out soon, probably of all these. That was Robert Aldrich, the man who brought us The Dirty Dozen, Kiss Me Deadly, the original version of The Longest Yard, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Great filmmaker. I'm a big fan of his work. He tackles the Bible in this one, which sounds like an interesting combination. The famous biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you're not familiar with that, where the God was going to destroy a couple cities that were known for their evil, and Abraham, the biblical figure, pled for God to spare the life of his nephew Lot. Although I think they cut out Abraham from the cinematic rendition. But the movie stars Stuart Granger, Stanley Baker, Anouk Aimee. 2.5 hour, of course. Got to be long for one of these biblical epics. And this is another one. Again, you're not going to probably see this released on Blu-ray anytime here around. There is a DVD that Fox put out, but it's in pan and scan. In other words, this movie was shot in scope, a 2:3:5 to 1 aspect ratio. So, or in layman's terms, when you watch it on your TV, it's going to have black bars above and below it. So when Fox put it out on DVD, they just put out a full screen version, which means you're losing almost half the image. But there was a Blu-ray released in Germany, which is what I got in. So looking forward to checking that out. So the way to watch these, of course, you generally a lot of times imported Blu-rays, they are region locked, which means that the company that put them out licensed the movie from whoever owns the rights to it, but they only have the rights to market it in a specific territory, a specific geographic territory. So they have to lock the Blu-ray so that it cannot play on Blu-ray players from other territories. But if you get what's called a region-free Blu-ray player, you can bypass that. And that's, what a lot of collectors, and myself included, have those. So we can, import these movies that probably aren't going to be seen on Blu-ray anytime soon over here. So that's pretty much it for physical media for this installment. And wanted to talk about, jump into a movie I saw just this weekend. That's one I want to view for some time. They just came out with it on Blu-ray a little while ago, and that's the 1976 film Trackdown, directed by Richard T. Heffron, who did a lot of genre movies in the 70s and early 80s. He did the Mickey Spillane film I, the Jury with Armand Assante. He did Future World, which was the sequel to Westworld. And he, in that film, starred Peter Fonda, also did another movie together called Outlaw Blues. So this movie stars James Mitchum, the oldest son of actor Robert Mitchum, the legendary Robert Mitchum. And James had been acting for a while at this point. He had made Thunder Road with his dad, where they play brothers, of all things. And he plays Jim Calhoun, who's a Montana rancher whose 17-year-old sister, Betsy, played by Karen Lamb, decides to run away to Los Angeles. She's kind of had a falling out with her mother, it's implied. She's resentful of small-town attitudes towards women. But, she arrives in L.A. and she's pretty much immediately out of her element. She quickly gets robbed by a group of street thugs. And then she befriends Erik Estrada, pre-chipped Erik Estrada, not realizing that he actually set her up for the robbery because he had to pay off a debt to the street gang. But he actually, even though he set her up for that, he does take to her. He does feel bad for her situation. And so they spend the night together, only for her to end up being kidnapped by the street gang, who beat up Estrada, take her captive, drug her up, and then team up with a pimp named Flash, played by the wonderful Ray Sharkey, and another great one of his great character performances. And they decide to take her to a bigger criminal operator named Johnny D, played by Vince Cannon, to try to sell her to him because he has a string of prostitutes working for him. But he doesn't really have any interest because she's so drugged out and looks like, trash to him. But his number one madam, his girl, who is a prostitute named Barbara, played by Ann Archer earlier in her career, she feels bad for Betsy and convinces Vince to pay for her release from these hoodlums, and takes her under her wing, kind of gets her back on her feet, and then basically says, listen, you can, go back to small town life if you want, or you can find a way to make money off what you're giving away for free, your body, and you can become a prostitute. And, Betsy is a very naive character, and decides to take Barbara up on her offer. And, meanwhile, James Mitchum shows up in L.A. looking for his sister. And obviously runs into the, the classic cold shoulder, closed doors from the police when he's trying to convince them that his sister's missing and that he needs help locating her, but ends up finding help from a social worker named Lynn, played by the lovely Cathy Lee Crosby. And so they go about trying to track her down, and this eventually has them cross paths with Erik Estrada, who, first is reluctant to do so, but then decides to team up with them and help find his sister. So just as a reminder, we do get into spoilers before I go any further. We do get into spoilers about talk about these movies. So when Jim Calhoun realizes that Johnny D has his sister, he wants to go and kind of guns a-blazing and get her back. But Lynn, the social worker, says, let's just try going through the cops now that we have more information. And, Jim reluctantly decides to go along with it, which unfortunately leads to another night passing, during which time Lynn takes on a client who links it rough and ends up beating her to near death. So we got Jim Calhoun, still searching for his sister, unaware of what's happened to her. Johnny D trying to cover up this incident. And this, of course, puts these guys on a collision course. So I'm a big fan of, obviously 70s cinema. I've made no secret of that. And, within 70s cinema, you have these subgenres like the vigilante genre, the revenge film. And this kind of definitely has elements of both of those. Also of kind of the, I don't know what you call the genre, the I guess you could call it the trackdown genre if you want to steal the title from this movie and name a genre, where someone's on the search for a character that they has gone missing or is, that they care about. A really good example of that would be the excellent George C. Scott movie Hardcore that Paul Schrader directed, where he's looking for his lost missing daughter in the seedier parts of the the world. And so this movie definitely has elements of those genres put together. Um, it definitely makes for a worthwhile watch. I think that it's strongest in its last third, though, as things really start escalating between these two factions of characters. I think that the journey to get to that last third could have been a little tighter. There's I feel like they could have condensed some of the narrative at the beginning. You basically have Lynn, this I'm sorry, not Lynn, Betsy, this sister who is taken in by Erik Estrada in a good way because he feels bad for her in the situation. But then she's abducted by the street gang, who then bring her to the pimp played by Ray Sharkey, who then brings her to Johnny D, and all those extra steps that they kind of put in the storytelling. It really kind of waters down what we really need, which is just to kind of like really see her situation devolve as we're cutting with Jim Mitchum looking for her. But instead, because it's kind of like drawing out the story with all these kind of extra steps instead of condensing that narrative, I think it kind of weakens the impact of what she's going through. And I kind of don't know that we even really need the Erik Estrada character at all. No offense to Erik. I love Ponch. I love Chips. But in the grand scheme of things, I think the focus really needs to be on James Mitchum's character. I think the way that a lot of these films work is you really kind of get in the mind of your protagonist. Like a great example, we talked about this in the first episode, Paul Kersey in the first Death Wish, Charles Bronson's character. One of the things that makes that film so successful is you're seeing this character change as a result of the horrible events that have happened to him and his family. And the actual tragedy that befalls him is pretty early on in the film, right? And that is a pretty well compact, condensed chain of events. But with Trackdown, you're getting away from the main character, James Mitchum's character, because you're spending this time with Erik Estrada and with the sister as she's kind of handed off from one person to another. And I don't think it's really necessarily helping sell the horror of what she's going through. I think that would be more potent if it was just, told in a shorter fashion. And then by bringing Erik Estrada kind of on board with our protagonist, as a helper to them, again, you're just kind of, you already have James Mitchum, who's supposed to be kind of, I feel like, our focal point. You have the social worker played by Cathy Lee Crosby. So now you're kind of splitting some of the attention that should be on James Mitchum to her. And now you're splitting it, a third time to, off to Erik Estrada's character. And so you're just kind of like, weakening that focus, which really needs to be on just James Mitchum searching for his sister, getting closer to her, coming up against these criminals, and then, ultimately, again, spoiler alert, finding out what happened to her, which is that she eventually is, Johnny D has her killed because she's so near death, they can't bring her to a hospital. He can't afford to risk getting investigated. So, she's dying anyways. He just has her killed. And kind of, making this a little worse, this whole situation with the focus on James Mitchum's character, is that even though I do love James Mitchum, I think he's got great physical presence. It's ridiculous the degree to which he looks and sounds like his father. He doesn't look like his son. He looks like a clone. It's insane. But, he's not getting awards for this performance. He doesn't really emote much. Not that he needs to, be any kind of, emotional wildcat in this role. Charles Bronson in Death Wish didn't have to, play to the back row, but the character does call for a little bit more, actually a bit more than what James Mitchum's putting forth. It's a kind of a monotone kind of walk through a performance. Not trying to knock James Mitchum. Like I said, big fan of him, Assault in Paradise and Thunder Road. But we definitely need to get a better sense of what he's going through in terms of just, trying to find his kid's sister, and then, ultimately realizing what happens to her. But, you get to that last third, and, in the film's like, 90, 100 minutes. So, it's that last half hour where, things really do start becoming more energized. The film has it's kind of well known for a shootout in an elevator shaft, which is a clever idea. Where James Mitchum is trying to sneak up to the criminal Johnny D's penthouse apartment, which can only be accessed by a private elevator. So he's trying to ride on top of a parallel elevator and jump onto Johnny D's elevator. Next thing you know, you got criminals on top of the elevators trying to have a shootout with Jim Mitchum, and they keep going up and down past each other. And it's a really clever idea. I think this is a film that, in scenes like that, might have benefited from being shot in a wider aspect ratio, like a 2:3:5. It's shot in a 1:8:5. But it's interesting what they do with that. It's got also some great, wonderful mid-century locations they shoot in. Johnny D's whole office with its wood paneling, and it's got like these rich blue curtains. It's all shot in a saturated color. It's lovely to look at, especially for a lover of mid-century like myself. And then the ultimate climax, the ultimate final confrontation has a really nice, satisfying sense to it. I think biggest props of anything for this film goes to Vince Cannon, who plays Johnny D. I mean, the guy does great with it. He nails it. It's one of, I think, the best screen villains I've seen in a while in a film that's a first time watch for me, because he really excellently, puts together all those different components. He's part businessman, part scumbag, part essentially a pimp or a criminal, but he's also got like something of a sensitive side. I'm definitely not trying to oversell that, because he's not like a sensitive guy, but you can tell he does kind of care somewhat for Barbara, his main squeeze, the prostitute's main squeeze, the Ann Archer plays. But no matter how much he cares about her or anyone, it's always business first, and his the crime comes first. But I looked him up, Vince Cannon, kind of to see what else he had done, because I was like, oh, he looks familiar. This guy really looks familiar. And then I realized I had just seen him a couple weeks ago when my girlfriend and I rewatched an episode of McMillan and Wife, which is a show I'm a big fan of. He did do some acting. He was in some other films too, like Blade, not the Wesley Snipes movie, but the 70s movie, and Young Blood, not the Patrick Swayze movie, but the 70s movie. But he was also really tight with Diane Cannon. They're not related, to my knowledge, even though they. Vince Cannon's, that's not even his real last name, but he was a manager for her. He represented her for a number of years. He was her personal manager. They even worked together on a short film that Diane Cannon directed that was made in 1976 called Number One. And in real life, he was actually married to Artist Lane, who was a painter and a sculptor. And he managed her too, and produced a number of her exhibitions. So not a lot of acting credits, but just really, I loved him in this movie. I thought he was great. And I think he's kind of like the high point of this movie. He's got a great look to him too. These suits he's rocking out, these great 70s outfits he's wearing, just a great presence. I wish he had done more, and I definitely want to try to see if there's anything else he did film-wise that's worth digging into. The cast also includes, as I mentioned, Karen Lamb playing, Betsy. She might be arguably best known for having been twice married to Dennis Wilson at the Beach Boys. She was also in the 1980 horror film The Unseen, which I guess you could call the horror movie of rock legends' wives, because it also stars Barbara Bach, who is the wife of Ringo Starr. Tony Burton, who we all know from the Rocky movies, playing Duke, Apollo Creed's trainer, who would go on to work with Rocky himself. He's got an early role in this movie. It's actually a really interesting scene where, and they have a couple scenes like this in the movie when Jim Mitchum arrives in LA and he's looking for his sister, where they kind of play off his own naivety, even though he's this, we're kind of expecting that with his sister's character, right, Betsy? She's going to show up in the big city and get totally taken advantage of. But he comes to the big city, and, he's wearing the cowboy hat, and the guy's massive. He's huge, very much that kind of fills that man's image. And he even kind of, his naivety is shown a little bit. There's a little scene where he sees another guy wearing kind of like cowboy duds, and, thinks he's met like, a brother in arms. And tries to get help from the guy to find his sister, and the guy just ends up coming on to him. And then another moment, this is where Tony Burton comes in. Tony Burton's one of 3 prostitutes in drag who, are busting Jim Mitchum's balls and then offer to, for money, help him find his sister. And of course, they're totally just going to roll him. They offer to take him to someone who for money will help him locate Betsy, but just take him down an alley and attempt to take him for everything he's got. Which then Jim Mitchum gets his chance to show off the muscles. So it was interesting though that that was a nice touch that they did to kind of show off how, even though Jim Mitchum's character we know he's able to handle himself in a tough situation. We're not concerned about his prowess with the guns or the fists, but still there is this part of him that isn't used to this territory and still can be taken advantage of, and it's kind of a weakness. But an early role from Tony Burton in the movie. Now, this movie had only originally been available. The only way you could watch it was part of a 4-movie DVD set that Shout Factory put out. It was an older full-screen transfer, but Scorpion releasing a little while back, it wasn't that long before Christmas, they were able to do a new high-def transfer in the right aspect ratio and distribute that through Kino Lorber. So that's how I watched it. Comes with a trailer, some radio spots, no other extras, no interviews or commentaries, unfortunately. Maybe there wasn't anyone who really wanted to talk about it now, but I think it's definitely, again, it's one of those films, especially for someone like me who likes this genre, likes this cast, likes this era. You're definitely going to want to check it out. It definitely brings up enough new, fresh things to it to keep your interest, but it doesn't quite register as one of the classics of the genre, or these genres plural, because like I said, there's some crossover between vigilante films, revenge films in the 70s, these kind of like searching for missing person films, and it definitely doesn't get up to the level of like a Death Wish or a Hardcore, but worth the see, worth picking it up and taking some time with it. You won't regret it if you're into these kind of films. So I think that's it for now. It's going to wrap this up. Thank you for sitting through the second episode of Carpet City Cinema. I'm just going to try to get about one of these out a week, and then when we're up to about 6, we'll upload them and get this going so people can listen to them. So thank you very much for tuning in to Carpet City Cinema, a Gila Films podcast. I'm David Weaver.